Hi ladies, I'm Jen Lormond, exercise physiologist, mom of 3, co-owner of Tighten Your Tinkler.
I'm Christina Walsh, mom of 2, physical therapist, and
co-owner of Tighten Your Tinkler.
And we are so excited today to answer 3 common pee problem questions that we get a lot.
We started off last week talking about how this stuff is much more complicated than most people tell you, and we are here to clarify a lot of this. We work with this all the time. We've also lived it, and we're here to answer 3 of the most common questions we get.
So the first one is, how come pee comes out when I stand up?
Yes, we often have women, we're asking all the detailed questions to figure out really
Diagnose all their issues. And we have women come in and say, okay, yes, I think I'm completely emptying my bladder. I don't know, but then I think I've got all the pee out, and then I stand up and a little bit more comes out. What's up with that? Why is that happening?
I'll show and you explain.
So, well, the view we're about to show you is, so like, say you cut right here this way and you're looking down. So you're looking down into the bowl of the pelvis. And we always talk, it's a sling of muscles. And I love to have a visual. Trusty anatomy book from PT school. This is the visual. So you're looking down into that pelvic bowl. You can see, so back here is tailbone. Here is pubic joint right in the front, and you can see the different directions, the diagonals that all these muscles sling across the whole pelvic bowl. And this is what we're talking about, that sling of musculature. So for you ladies who might be experiencing that issue of, okay, I peed, I think I got it all out, I stand up and a little bit more comes out. That's often due to what they call a hypertonic pelvic floor or pelvic bowl. And that means over tight. This is more common than you might imagine. So if that's you, you're probably dealing with a hypertonic pelvic bowl or pelvic floor, or maybe another practitioner or provider has told you that's what you have going on. Make no mistake that that does not mean your pelvic floor is over strong. Yes. I just had this conversation with a girl a few days ago, and she said, well, I mean, I was told I have a hypertonic pelvic floor, so clearly I don't need exercises to strengthen it. It's like, oh no, no. A hypertonic muscle is a weak muscle. And I've heard Jen explain that so many times, and it's just, that's the clearest way to explain it. And the muscles work by little kind of fingers that grab each other and then release, and they have to be spaced the right way to grab each other effectively and work. So if they're here, there's no more grabbing to shorten to contract that muscle, so it cannot work. It's weak. So what you have to do with a hypertonic pelvic floor is gently learn how to stretch and release that muscle, and then also rebuild the strength in it.
Well said. And just to add a caveat to that, we showed the sling of musculature. What that picture didn't show is the sphincter muscles that are also attached by soft tissue to that pelvic bowl that can also be tight.
And that can be, so if, you imagine there's muscles wrapping around the hole the pee comes out of. And if those muscles are taut bands, that's what's going on. You're trying to relax your pelvic floor, let all the pee out, but because those bands of muscle around that hole where the pee comes out are so tight, it cannot open fully. And that's what's going on for you if that is your situation.
And stretching and breathing can have a tremendous impact, as it does on any other skeletal muscle group. Again, I think we've said this what feels like a gazillion times. Your pelvic bowl is skeletal muscle. It's not a magical unicorn. It does, in fact, operate the way all of the other skeletal muscles in the body function.
And we taught some stretches for hypertonic pelvic bowl. They would be found in our Pain with Sex show. So go back and consult, because this is also an issue that comes up there. So go consult that show for your hypertonic pelvic floor stretches. Yeah,
we'll drop a link to that below.
The next one that comes up is women who have looked into what we can provide. They're excited to come in and they're going, okay, so I saw on your website, you put recurrent UTIs as one of the things that you guys can help with at TYT, and why? You know, my doctor said, or Jen's story is particularly pertinent here. What happened to you?
Well, I had a really bad UTI because at the time I hadn't been diagnosed with prolapse yet. It was after my second delivery. And because of that really bad UTI, the physician said, and I was in my 20s here Well, once you have one this bad, the trend seems to be that you should expect to just begin to have these recurrent UTIs. So, when you start seeing blood in your urine, because you're going to have less and less symptoms, you just need to go to the doctor and get on an antibiotic.
And that was basically her prognosis for the rest of her life in her late 20s. This is what you're going to be dealing with. Welcome. And along with lots of other issues that we've also told you about, that Jen will surely tell you about again. But this did not have to be her story.
No.
So why that happens and why it has to do with what we can help you with is that happens because you're not getting all the pee out of your bladder when you are peeing. And that's what causes, so there's urine left over in your bladder after you think you've peed it all out, you haven't, and it sits there. It's not supposed to sit there, and it sits there and it forms that infection. That UTI comes from residual urine left in the bladder after you think you've gotten it all out.
The bladder or the urethra, I should say, the tube that you pee out of, because oftentimes it does come for me from my urethra with the urethra seal that I have that kink in the hose. And so, yeah.
And that's where these recurrent UTIs come from. And so here's one thing that you can start doing today that will help you to better fully empty your bladder. Stop pushing your pee out.
Game changer.
And this,
tell the story.
Why does this matter? Well, it matters because you're going to sleep better at night because you're not going to have to pee as frequently. You're not going to be that girl who has to pee. You get up 5 minutes later and then you have to pee again. One girl came into our office and we started to work with her and she was all excited. We're asking her all the detailed questions about the pee stuff. And through some of the things we deduced, we said, why don't you just go home and try this not pushing your pee out thing? She's like, I don't think I do that. I'm like, I don't know. You work in healthcare. You're probably rushed between patients. You might be surprised. And you're also just a mom. So the kids are banging at the door. You're ready to hurry, hurry, hurry. I'm just going to push it out. Get over this. Could you tell us how many times a day you're peeing? Just track it for one day. And she texted me before the end of 24 hours and she said, how did you know? She's like, I can't believe it. I was totally doing that. And she's like, I was peeing over 20 times a day. She just didn't even realize it had gotten that bad. She'd had 3 kids at that point and it had slowly gotten worse over time. And once you actually track how many times a day you're peeing, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, that's out of control because it's not normal ever to have to pee more than 10 times a day.
I was going to say the norm.
And you shouldn't be having to get up at night to pee, even if you've had a couple of kids. So that doesn't have to be your new normal. So stop pushing your pee out, just relax the muscles and let it come out peacefully.
Yes. It only takes an extra 10 seconds to not pee it out, to not push it out rather.
That'll help move things in the right direction with completely emptying your bladder and hoping move things in the right direction with decreasing recurrent UTIs if you've gotten to that point.
Yeah. And the last question is, I feel like I'm relaxing down there,
but I still have trouble starting my pee. What could be the problem here? And I alluded a little bit to it in the last question, which is you could have a kink in the hose or, a urethra seal, which is just a fancy word for a hernia of the urethra. Whether you have that or prolapse or something going on, there's pressure on the urethra blocking the passage of urine.
That's the tube that the pee has to go. So the bladder's sitting up here and then there's a little tube, urethra, and then it comes out of your body through that sphincter in the pelvic floor. And if that tube is not a free passage, if it's not nice and long and straight and lengthened, that's what Jen, I love the way she describes this, the kink in the hose, because we all know what happens to a garden hose if you bend it, no water's coming out. And that's what happens just by the positioning that occurs with the bladders kind of pressing down, the tube kind of gets like this, and then the pee can't come out because it's bent just like a garden hose. And we teach relief techniques for that in our program. Even if this is you can still eliminate that problem. You can learn to completely empty your bladder with a couple of simple techniques, gain that up and in strength around those muscles to add better support to begin with. And this doesn't have to be your new normal.
And a lot of times I get the question of, well, how do I know if I'm not completely emptying my bladder? Like, how am I going to know this? And I said, well, do you pee and then 5 minutes later feel like you have to pee again? If that is you, that means that you're not completely emptying your bladder. And that's kind of the barometer that you would know.
Yeah, and if you want to, if you really want a medical test to discern this, you can get an ultrasound of your bladder where they take the ultrasound and measure how much pee is in there. You go to the bathroom and then they check it again to see if there's any residual left in there. So there are actually objective tests you can get if you're interested with your urologist, probably
Yes,
to get this sort of thing. Urodynamics, I think it's called.
you are correct.
And so that's possible if you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to know now. If you're that girl, go to the urologist and ask for that test and start implementing some of these tools and techniques we've shared with you, because it doesn't have to be you forever.
Keep your questions coming. We love them. If you're not following us on IG yet, why not? Follow us over on titan.your.tinkler over on IG, and we look forward to seeing you next
More
week.
bladder health stuff coming at you.